Welcome to the Turn the Page podcast with Alyssa and Leah. This is a podcast where we share our love for children's literature and help you create page turners.
Today, we are going to review some of the New York Times bestsellers. So what we did was we went on New York Times bestseller list. We picked one of the top children's books, and we also picked what they called one of the top children's middle grade books.
Yes.
So it's Wonder, and the ages are, it said, recommended for 8 to 12.
Yeah,
and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But that is where we got these books from. So we read them, and we are now going to discuss them. This is like our book club. So it's really exciting. I'm really excited for this episode. All right, so the first book that we're going to talk about is the children's book. It's a picture book. It's called The Wonderful Things You Will Be by Emily Winfield Martin. And so what made us read this book was, of course, the New York Times.
So it might not necessarily be number one right now, but it's probably in the top because it has been in the top for the New York Times bestsellers for 402 weeks right now. I think that, that shows it's a great book.
Mm-hmm.
I found often a lot of the other books are books that, we have in our classrooms, but this was one we had not even
heard of.
Yeah. Right now, the top one is Bluey book. So a book based on a TV show. But so we thought this would be a great one to start with.
Yeah. So I loved it. I would definitely recommend it. I would recommend it as almost like a back to school book. You could read it for back to school time. It's feels like, oh, the places you will go.
I agree. It's definitely on that same kick as Oh, the Places You'll Go, or I Knew You Could. I thought it would be a very good, when someone has a baby shower and you have to sign a book. I feel like this will be a really good one because it kind of talks about in the book that you can be a wonderful thing. And I wonder what you'll be as a parent. It's a great one for a parent to give to a child too. But it's, it really represents a bunch of different things you can be in your life, starting with more fantasy things, moving into early childhood, and then, finally kind of has some pictures of different careers and traveling the world and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So this is definitely a book that you would read aloud to a child.
Absolutely. The joy of this, I think, is your mom or dad or grandma or loved one reading this book as you kind of cuddle up and you're talking to them almost
about what do you want to be?
Yeah, so young children couldn't read, necessarily decode this book, but it's a very simplistic plot that even a very young child could understand. Obviously, this is a picture book, so it has beautiful illustrations that a child would love to see looking over your shoulder. And the illustrations are multicultural. They have kids of all different races, and I think that that's really great because kids could see themselves in the different children in this story, which I think is fantastic.
Absolutely. And I think this should go on your back to school reading list.
I definitely do. I thought the ending was really, really precious too, because it kind of alludes to the fact that whatever you'll be, I'll love whatever you'll be. And I think that's such a great message to give your child, whatever you're going to grow up into, I'm going to support you. And I loved that. I think it would be great for a teacher to read her kids too, because I love tracking where my kids go kind of in life. And that's pretty much it because it's a picture book. It's short and sweet. It's an easy read.
The next book that we read was Wonder by R.J. Palacio.
I have read this book before, so I already knew about this book. I've read this with students. I guess 4 or 5 years ago now. It was a newer book at the time when I read it, and there's a lot of movement around this book. Obviously, it's been turned into a movie.
Yeah.
It is number 1 on the New York Times bestsellers list, and it has been, it has been for a while. It has been for 452 weeks. It has been on the New York Times bestseller list. So definitely one that people are picking consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And Leah had never.
I did not. And I avoided this book I've known about this for a long time. I avoided it because I knew it would make me cry. And it just wasn't something that I was like, I feel like crying. I never was like, I feel like crying, so I'm going to read it. So I had never read this book. And when you read it with your class, it was third grade.
Yes. It was actually a particularly difficult year that I had with some kids that needed the message of like choose kind.
And that's why you chose.
And that is why I picked this book. And I just wanted like the message of the kindness, the pervading kindness and choosing to be a friend even when it's hard. And so that is why I picked up this book and read it to my kids. And I will say they did like it. I think this kind of goes into what I think we're going to talk about next. I think I would recommend it for a little bit older than third grade. Like maybe like middle school, like fifth grade for us is elementary school, but I think fifth grade would be a really good time to read this book.
7, yes.
Yes. And I think this is a really good one if your child is reading it, to read it too.
Along with them. Absolutely.
Because there's so many powerful things to talk about, things that kids struggle with, but also things that I think adults struggle with.
And so as we say that, I do want to recommend this while you're to read this with a child if they're reading it. However, I do want to say before we go any further that while there aren't really like spoilers we can say for this book, we are going to talk about the events. We're going to talk about the characters. So if you, for some reason, want to be surprised in any way, you might not want to listen to our review of this. However, know that it's great and we recommend it. But I just want to say that, yeah, we can't spoil this book for you, but we're going to talk about it in detail.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I recommend this for teachers. I recommend this for parents because you will get a perspective of children that you might have forgotten. I definitely forgot it. So,
see, I think this is often what I see in kids. Some of the...
from myself.
Oh, from yourself. Yeah. I think some of the great thing about this book is it's middle school kids. So it's their first year in middle school. And like some of the like kind of like sneaky unkind behaviors that it gives me kind of the chills to say that do happen in schools. And even if you have a kind kid overall, a nice kid, a quote unquote good kid, that all kids are, but the things that they do, either intentionally or unintentionally, are so real in this book.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's really powerful in it. And I think it's very easy to read. So
yeah,
even though I'm saying I would recommend for fifth grade, I think younger can read this. It's
because of the concepts. If you have never heard of Wonder, it is about a 10-year-old with
a facial abnormality.
Yeah, that goes to school for the first time, and he and the other characters, you get their point of view as well, navigate that first year of middle school. So it's not only from his perspective, you get the family member of his sister's perspective, and you get his classmates' perspective as well. So that's the premise of the book.
Yes. So I truly, I love this book. And I think one reason I love this book is the characters are really well written. They're all very believable.
Mm-hmm.
They're all kind of going through their own struggle. And though the book centers around Augie, August Pullman is the main character. He is the child with the facial abnormality. It isn't just his story.
No.
And I think that's really great because oftentimes when we read a book, we're only reading from the main character's point of view, and like it's kind of like a self-involved thing. But I think what's really powerful about this is like it's about every kid, and all of us are reacting to things happening in the world based on our own lens.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it does a good job of portraying that.
Right. I think I got the most choked up from his sister Olivia's point of view, and from Jack Will's point of view, who is one of his closest friends. And I could see our students in those characters so well.
I could see myself in Jack Will a lot. And when you read the book, you'll see Jack kind of messes up at a point and says something unkind. And that 100% resonated with me because sometimes we say things without thinking, especially, as adults or older kids, we just say things that have no meaning to us, but then remembering how it could feel to someone else is so important.
And also, and in the beginning of the school year, Jack was asked to befriend August by the principal and his mom, and that was a big ask, and he was reluctant. And even though he is a kid who I would say did choose kindness for the most part, he was reluctant about, he knew who August was, and he was like, I do not want to do this. And I think, first of all, that's completely okay. That was a huge thing. And him like just evolving and realizing, oh, this is something that I want to do and need to do. I've seen that in kids too, where at first they're going to be hesitant to do something, and just give them time. Just give them a minute to think about it and think it through. I think his mom handled that amazingly and was like, it's your choice, I understand. And she gave him time to think it through. She said, you're going to take the night and we'll talk about it again tomorrow. And that was the right call,
Right. I thought it was interesting too. So the principal picks 2 other children to also help. And I thought it was really interesting from a teacher's perspective. And I think as a parent too, but my child hasn't really gotten to this, that sometimes the kid you think is the nice kid is not the nice kid.
Right.
So one of the kids they pick is like downright mean.
Yeah.
To August.
To the adults, he seemed like he was the right choice.
Correct.
And that's not always.
Yeah, and I even think like the other little girl they picked, Charlotte, it's not that she was unkind. I think probably I'm a Charlotte, and like she's just busy doing other things. So like she kind of checks in on Augie in the story, and she like cares, but she's also really more concerned with like kind of what's going on in her world. And with kids, I mean, they kind of are like even as adults sometimes.
They are not thinking of others, And I mean, of course, at 10 years old, yes, they should be. However, young kids, elementary school, I mean, I thought a lot about parents who have, and of course, not to this extent, but who have reached out and said, oh, my child has hurt their foot, has a boot on their foot. Or, oh, my child got a haircut, and isn't loving it, and they're really nervous about going to school. And just and it's like, first of all, if you're a parent, I will always recommend just reaching out to the teacher when your child is apprehensive, because they will not walk in the classroom and tell the teacher, oh, I'm nervous about my haircut today. Oh, I'm nervous about wearing a cast on my arm. I'm nervous how people are going to react. And so the teacher is kind of thinking, oh, everything's fine, and doesn't know. But I'm so thankful when I do know that I can just create a situation where we, talk about it, or make sure that I check in with them, and things like that. So
yeah, or even reassure the parent. Like I know when my child had some stuff going on one day, I sent a message to her teacher, and then she messaged me later in the day and was just like, hey, it really hasn't been an issue today. And as a mom, I didn't want to be that parent to say that something was going on, but that made me feel 10 billion times better that maybe it was a bigger deal at home when it was the 2 of us, and her fear of the situation was bigger than like the actuality at school. But yeah, I also thought about, I have taught a child that had a severe accident in a fire, and from what it's obvious point of view, he talks about just, being treated different by everyone, and like that shiny smile he describes it as. And like, I know I am guilty of that, because sometimes in a situation where I feel uncomfortable, I'm like overcompensating. And I think that it's so awesome that he went to school, because I think of like my child, not my child, but the child who's in my class that this had happened to. And the more I got to know him, the more that was just like normal. Like that was just like how he was. And it really didn't bother me. But like he was constantly asked about it, to the point where kids were not being mean to him necessarily. They would just be like, oh my gosh, what happened to your face? What happened to your face? And this was like a constant thing for him. So I think a book like this brings up those things. Like Augie would have rathered someone ask than to pretend that it was like normal and then like not be his friend, really, not get to know him.
Yeah.
Because he was treated different.
Yeah. And that's why this book is such a great read for any child, because if you don't have a situation like this in your family, you are just not accustomed to how you should react, what you should do. And I mean, I can say this for me. I learned a lot from this book as an adult, even of things to say or how I should react it. And so, I mean, what a wonderful read. I'm so glad I did read it now.
I know. It's so good because it really makes you like really think. And it's so many, I think it's just so great for kids making that transition. So especially, like kids that are about to go to middle school or something, because they also have the kids that just kind of follow the mean kid who is popular,
right,
who weren't mean kids, but they were acting mean. I mean, I have seen this happen before with kids where like there's a kid that maybe is not the cool kids, and then one kid decides they're not going to be friends with that child, and then other kids just follow. They're not actively mean to that kid, but in being not their friend, they are being mean. So I also just think it's a powerful discussion tool,
right,
and it makes you kind of check yourself even as an adult.
And the message at the end, and they go into this in detail. I'm glad it's not just like kind of something where you have to kind of say, oh yeah, we should be kind. No, at the end of this book, it is they have like a ceremony at the end of the year where the principal is actively talking about choosing kindness. So it very explicitly, it will tell the reader why you should choose kindness and how to do that. And like, I thought that was really good for young readers who is kind of like, what do you think this message is? No, there's no thinking
right
that this book is about choosing kindness. This is what it is.
Yeah, this is a big spoiler. So if you don't want to know this, skip forward like a minute or two. And I was hoping at the very end when Augie wins the award that Jack will win the award.
Alyssa, I thought Jack should get the award too,
because he was a good friend.
Oh my God, I totally agree. Not to downcut August in any way at all, but I was like, of course it's going to be Jack.
Right. They both deserve it, and Augie's been through so much.
Yes.
But I think that Jack will. If my child was Jack Will, I would be so proud.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Julian.
Okay.
Julian was terrible.
Yeah.
Julian was like the stereotypical bully.
The bullies at the end that actually like got physical with them.
Oh yeah,
they were.
But Julian was worse than them.
Julian was a character throughout the book who actively tried to do things to hurt August, like hurt his feelings. But he also he does encounter bullies where they get rough with him and his friends as well. So it's not just like emotional. It's also like a physical. I mean, yeah, I didn't like those characters.
No, not at all. And this book has inspired a lot of other wonder books. So R.J. Palacio has like a journal that goes along with this book. There's other stories about August. I would like to read more of them and kind of see more of them, just because I truly love this book and I kind of forgot how much I loved it.
So do you know if anyone in our district or any schools around us have this as a required reading?
I don't know, but I think this would be such a great required read for middle school.
Yeah.
I just think it's a great, yeah. It's also a movie, obviously.
On Netflix, I think.
Mm-hmm. I want to watch the movie. I'm probably going to do that next week before we get back.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay without watching the movie, only because I know I'm going to cry. I am happy I did cry.
When did you cry?
Okay, I cried at the end of August, which was the Halloween moment, where this is the first time August overhears someone talking bad about him, and he has a moment where he wants to leave school. And then after that scene, it goes into his sister Olivia's point of view, and she starts talking. And so I cry through Olivia's point of view too. And then also their dog dies.
Yeah.
So just be warned. It does have a happy ending at the end, but like, and Augie was super close. You know, that was a big moment for him. So yeah, I cried up, and I mean like tears, not just like I had.
Yeah. See, I remembered most of those things, so I did not cry. One moment, there was like a moment where his mom and him were having a conversation, and he kind of talks about like how he like, oh, this is gonna make me cry, how he like messed things up for his mom. Like she thought she was gonna have a normal kid, and like she had this other normal kid, and like that he messed that up. And like as a parent, obviously that devastated me. It's bringing tears to my eyes just thinking it. Only because obviously your kid could never do anything that would ruin your life, but in some ways they can make it harder. But like that hardness is like the beauty, and like the recognizing that each child's unique and special. So that part was emotional for me.
Yeah. And just like I thought so much about, not only in my classroom, but in, you know, seeing the kids that I teach grow up. They go through 5th grade at our school. And I have seen hard moments that these kids go through at school. And as a teacher, it's hard not to get emotional about those things. About, you know, I love these children, and it's hard to see them go through anything hard, of course. And so, like, just listen. I listened to this book on Audible, and it was hard to listen to that too. So like throughout the book, I was like this close, you know, to crying. It's an emotional book. It really is.
It really is. And I love the different points of view and how everybody kind of has something different going on. And like the sister has some like friendship troubles that are normal kid stuff. Mm-hmm. And I just think that it's really validating, especially like I just think parents, you need to read this. This is the Children's Lit podcast, but it is, I think, eye-opening to the world of kids.
Yeah, and their thoughts. And it also shows a lot of situations where parents have contacted me, where maybe someone has said something to their child. I always, of course, every situation is different. Every kid is different. Most of the time, I am reassuring the parent they did not mean this the way that it came off. They are being kids, and they are navigating worlds and emotions and new experiences the best way that they can. And that's not always graceful. Mm-hmm. And so it also shows you that, yeah, while these kids made some poor choices, it was not in their heart to make those poor choices. They didn't, one kid, yes, but not all of them were trying to actively make poor choices. And that happened. So just knowing, you know, if something does happen with your child, just knowing, okay, I need to give the benefit of the doubt to other children as well. And just, of course, we have to investigate the situation, and I want to make it a learning experience.
Yes. And I think it's good to make it a learning experience and not just write the kid off. So then one child that was super mean, he was also coming from a family of a mom who was not nice, who was doing, I would say, active bullying to Augie too, in a more behind the scenes fashion. But I think, you know, if you're worried if your child is a good child, like they almost all are, but they do mess up. And I think, you know, it'd be easy to end the story at what happened with him and Jackwell, and like Jackwell's a mean kid. Mm-hmm. And because the story continues on. And I mean, because Augie's like a really forgiving character.
I was about to say, it's about forgiveness as well.
I think that's so important. You know, not everybody is meant to be best friends, but also you have to give your friends grace because they're going to mess up and you're going to mess up too. And I think that's really important to learn as a middle schooler, as an adult, as a person, because if you don't give people a little bit of grace, then, I mean, you're going to end up writing off everybody, you know? It's hard to be perfect all the time. None of us are.
And we hope that if you've read it or if you are going to read it, share your thoughts.
Yeah, we do have an Instagram account, turnpage_podcast, that you can follow and would love to interact with you there. One thing that I would definitely want to ask other people to answer is a question I'm about to ask you, Leah, is what was your favorite precept? So the teacher, Mr. Brown, had a precept every month, which if you're unfamiliar, precepts are just kind of like those wise sayings. And he had the kids, I would love to do this with my class. I might have to do this year. Write about what it meant to them. And obviously meant a little something different to every kid. And then he had them each either mail their own precept that they created or find a precept and send it to them. And so that is listed at the end of the book, all his precepts, and then the kids of the story's precepts that they mailed to him, which were really good.
Okay, so I'm going to say that my favorite precept was the one that was discussed in the book. Your deeds are your monuments. And so that's the first one, and that August like shares his writing, I guess, about. And I just loved it. This is my first time hearing about this, so I love the concept and Augie's perspective. So is it your deeds are your monuments, and what he said, and which I believe I agree with him, is that what you do matters more than who you are, what you look like. What you do is gonna make a lasting impact.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that one's a good one. I picked kind words do not cost much, yet they accomplish much. And I picked that one because sometimes, I guess the choose kind thing I think is important for someone like me. I think I'm like always pretty nice. I don't think I have trouble being like pretty nice, but like sometimes I forget to be like intentionally kind. Like we have a friend that is just, I feel like intentionally kind. Like we've talked about, like she'll bring us lunch for like when we're at school, or like make us both dinner, and like she does like super kind, considerate, thoughtful things. And I think about that, like kind words are really not that hard to give out. Like she's really put in the effort a lot of times, but I mean, kind words don't cost much, yet they accomplish much. And I just think about that. I've always thought about that with my kids. Whatever I say, I know makes an impact, so I'm intentionally saying things that I want to say. But even with adults and friends, I think that it's really important to remember that it's not that hard to say kind things to someone and to make every child or every person feel special, but they really mean a lot to people.
Absolutely. All right, Alyssa, what's making you turn the page?
Oh goodness, I thought of something and then now I have forgotten it. What is making me turn the page? Goodness gracious. What is making me turn the page? I guess right now it's books that teach kindness. I really want to read some more of these books, the Wonder books, because I think that that's really important. I would love to see if there is some Wonder-like books for a younger age group, because I would love to talk about this more with my child, because sometimes she's unaware. She's 5, and that's normal for a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
But, intentionally like teaching kindness, I think, is so important. And especially as she goes into kindergarten, I want her to choose to be kind and choose to not leave people out and make people feel included. So yeah, definitely some social emotional type books.
Yeah, awesome. What's making me turn the page right now is our classroom read alouds. Our first unit in our class, we read books about how people in other countries get books. We read about mobile libraries. And so this is my favorite unit. I mean, it's
As a book lover.
So it's absolutely my favorite unit, and that's what's making me turn the page right now.
Thank you for listening to Turn the Page podcast with Alyssa and Leah. Please take a minute to follow us and leave us a review. We would love to hear from you.
Speaking of hearing from you, we would love for you to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at turnthepage_podcast or Turn the Page Podcast on Facebook.
Bye, y'all.